Hi, welcome back. I have another video for you where I'm going to be talking about Warhammer the Old World and everything we've learned in the last week or so since Warhammer Day and the big reveal of the new Bretonnian range. Now, admittedly, most of it is not new, but enough of it is new, I think, that it gives us a great idea of what new armies are going to look like. And the first thing they showed off, the first thing they focused on, was the Pegasus Knight that was leaked um, several months ago, anyways. All we saw was the Pegasus back then, um, but now we have the whole model. It's plastic. It's going to be in the starter box most likely. I don't know if they confirm that, but I mean, I don't think there's any real doubt that this is going to be the centerpiece for the Bretonnian side or the Bretonnian box, depending on which rumor you believe. And it's just cool. So it lets you make either a Duke, a Baron, or a BSB, is what they've told us. There is a picture somewhere of a king. King Luen, I believe, is his name. Just like the last one, except this guy is Luen the Orc Slayer. Anyways, there's a picture of him somewhere. I could not find it. I don't know why. I know I've seen it. And, anyways, he looks like either he is a part of this kit or he's at least based off of parts of it. But it's possible there is one more Pegasus kit we haven't seen, or there's one more variant of how you can build this guy. Either way, um, it's very cool. I guess it will come down to whether or not that guy has other mount options, or if he's just on a Pegasus. And I guess that's the other thing too, is if I mistook a Pegasus and a Hippogriff for one or the other. But yeah, it's very nice to have this guy shown off because we get to see what a new 2023 sculpt. I mean, probably 2022 or 2021. I admit it's probably been out or finished. I mean, for some time, but this is something that's been sculpted at the same time as 40k armies that we've seen recently, Age of Sigmar armies, Warcry, all these amazing new modern miniatures. But this one here is fantasy. And while fantasy has its own version of over the top, it's still quite grounded in most armies, and Bretonnia especially. This is a knight who's on a very large, what I'm calling Royal Pegasus, and he just looks like a knight. And yes, he's got the giant chapel thing on top of his helmet, and he's riding again a Pegasus. But he doesn't look. It's not like looking at the new Age of Sigmar, Cities of Sigmar army, where there's a guy or a woman, I forget, riding like a manticore, or like a person that's on like someone who's like in a bucket on the back of an ogre. Like, there's all these different things in Age of Sigmar and 40k that makes them so outlandish, but we get to see all that quality modern sculpting, digital sculpting, on just a really beautiful fantasy model that looks like it belongs in fantasy. So I'm really happy with this model. Um, I'm confused a little bit about a BSB standard on a Pegasus. I do think that might lend to an idea of where the rules are going and how you can possibly gain, let's call it cover, for characters by being near units. I still think characters will be in the units. I just think it's possible that maybe there might be a proximity rule of some kind, because otherwise I don't see how this guy's going to survive as a BSB. But then again, it wouldn't be the first time GW released a beautiful model that has no place on the battlefield because you can't really use it without losing it immediately. So I guess we'll see. Dukes and Barons, I assume that's Lords and Heroes, or whatever the equivalent is going to be now. I don't know what army building is going to look like, but I think there's a pretty good chance it's going to look relatively the same as it did before. There might be different rules to how you do it. It might be more akin to the Age of Sigmar battle line system, and you can have so many characters, so many battle lines, so many monsters, whatever. That might be how they do it. Um, I still prefer the fantasy way, but it's not a bad way to do it. It's more modern, it's sleeker. They do seem to want to get rid of anything that could be considered difficult by the standard player, and I guess building armies around percentages could be considered difficult for some people. I'm going to get off this little tangent in just a second. I just want to get it out of the way while I'm thinking of it. But we all see those memes posted up of how do you answer this math question, and it's based around the fact that people don't know order of operations. So it's not like it's unrealistic to think that maybe there really were lots of people complaining about the math side of Warhammer Fantasy. I never saw a problem with it, but I do know some people that probably would have had a problem with that if they were even willing to read the big rule book. But, um, you know, it is what it is there. I'm going to move on past this topic because I want to keep going and not bog myself down too much. Sorry about that. So yeah, here he is again, different angles, also built as the BSB, so we get an idea of what he's going to look like. Um, there's also some different head options for the horse itself. It's a cool model. Um, I really like everything about this. There's also a lot of lock and key imagery we're going to see, I think. I have an idea of what that means and what that refers to, and I'll come over that. I'll go over that in a minute. But yeah, I also included a picture of the Pegasus Knights, the old ones, because they are being re-released. And it's important to note that these are 20-year-old models, and they were sculpted by hand, or very limited computer usage anyways. And it's very obvious. You can see the difference. And I think we do need to kind of set our expectations that new players might be very interested in this. Maybe they've always sort of liked the idea of fantasy, and just, they missed the boat. Or maybe they're total war players. But it doesn't matter because when you look at what GW sculpts today and you look at this new Pegasus Knight Lord, when you look at the Pegasus Knights, there is a distinct quality difference. And again, I don't think it's a bad thing. I love those models, and many of us love these models. But we have to acknowledge that newer players will not have the same attachment to older models that we do, the same as I do not have the attachment to Rogue Trader era models that players from the Rogue Trader era, from the first and second edition Warhammer Fantasy era, they love those miniatures, and I don't think they're very good. And it's not because I see them as poorly done. I just know that the quality of the sculpts were below what I was used to when I started. And so I think it's reasonable to expect that new players are going to look at this guy and look at them and sort of be disappointed when he has to unit up with those guys, because it's going to be obvious not only is he the character, but he is the much better sculpted model. So something just to keep in mind when inevitably you have people complaining about this. Um, they don't mean ill towards it, I don't think. I think it's just a natural reaction that we're going to have to, just deal with. But then we get a continuation of how spoiled we're going to be. Anybody who doubts whether or not GW is committed to this game, I don't know what else between that Pegasus and these Foot Knights needs to be done to show you that GW is committed to this game. Maybe it won't last again. Maybe in 2 years it'll be a dead system. It'll be forgotten. Maybe we'll be just like the Horus Heresy players, really just complaining about how nothing gets done for us and that we're a dead system. But I don't think that's the case. These are nice models. Yes, they're big. They're huge. Unless there's something to be put around them to show scale, I'm just gonna say these are massive figures, and that's fine. If Warhammer Fantasy had never gone away the way it did, had not ended with the end times and continued, this is what we would have today either way. This would be either, um, you know, something like the last Bretonnian book should have been and received, or we would just be getting these guys now or, at some point. Because this is what GW does now. This is the quality of miniature they create. This is the style, the aesthetic they create. But they still are respecting Bretonnian aesthetics as far as I'm concerned. Yes, it looks different, but 5th edition knights versus 6th edition knights look different. The 5th edition, what's it called? Hippogriff. King Luen in 5th edition did not look the same as King Luen in 6th edition. These are things we have to acknowledge. GW scales things up. They've been doing that forever. My models from various editions in various systems, they get bigger, they get smaller, they get more or less physically, you know, anatomically scaled properly or worse, depending on the edition. But if you look at even the Island of Blood High Elves, those guys versus the plastic and pewter High Elves they replaced, night and day. We were going in this direction anyways, and I am just happy to finally be there. I'm happy that we get to see what we were going to get, and it's not always going to remain that what if scenario in my head. Even if this game fails, I still get these foot knights, and I'm happy for it. So you can build them as foot knights with sword and shield, or with great axes. So two very different uses. Very likely these are heavy armor, unless we have a different armor and save system. These are probably going to be like a 5+ save, and it'll just be down to whether or not you give them more defense or more offense. One of the things I like about this unit the most, though, is the Battle Standard Bearer. The Battle Standard Bearer, or not the Battle Standard Bearer, but sorry, the Standard Bearer. He has an icon. Now, some people have complained about the icon. They'd rather have a banner. I agree. I hope the option is in there, but I like this icon a lot, and it's back to those keys and locks. In France, in Paris, I believe there's a bridge where couples will go and they'll put a padlock on the bridge. This is a sign of devotion and that they're locking each other, locking themselves to each other in a sign of love and devotion. As I said, I think that's what's being conveyed here. You can see there's lots of locks on there. I think that is knights are going up and they're locking themselves onto the icon, showing love and devotion for the lady, possibly love and devotion for each other. Um, Remember, these are Arthurian knights. These are not gritty, based in reality, Holy Roman Empire knights. These are chivalric. These are knights of the realm. These are, you know, guardians of like, honor and you know, justice. And while they're flawed, we know how they treat their peasants. It doesn't matter. You know, when you look at the knights, they are these paragons, and I think that the idea of them locking their devotion onto this icon to tell the lady, we are here for you, we are devoted for you, to you for all time through this, and here's this sign that I'm giving you, this symbol of my devotion, is a lock. Whether or not Games Workshop has done that for this reason, or whether or not, I'm way off the base, that's my head canon. When I put this unit together, that's why those locks are there. And I really love that detail. I think it just looks so good. And the same as on the other model, the Pegasus. I just think having the locks and keys, I think it's a very cool symbol of devotion. And it's an army based around devotion. So, very cool. Now, here's another problem unit. Not a bad one, but a unit that we're going to have to expect some people to complain about, because this is your core unit. This is Knights of the Realm and Knights Errant plastic kit, released in 2003, 6th edition, and I love these guys. I have many of them myself, and they're cool. They are iconic to me. These knights were the reason I jumped onto Bretonnia, and I bought the big Bretonnia boxed army when it came out for 6th edition. Like, I didn't screw around. I didn't, dip my toes. I said, fuck it. I want that whole box. Like, I don't give a shit what it cost. I don't remember. It was like, I don't know, let's just call it $400. I mean, it was a lot of money. Um, I don't know what it, values to today, but it was way too much money for, like, I don't know how old I was. Like, let's say 18. Um, but I did it anyways because, fuck it. I want these guys. And yeah, just like the Pegasus Knights, people are going to complain about these because of their age. 20 plus years old, hand sculpted, and full of chunky details like we got back then. The horses look great, the riders not so much. Now, they're not the worst models I've ever seen. This face here, that's still better than some of the face models I have seen, or face sculpts I have seen on newer models. Um, but, this here, where'd it go? There. These helmets, I think they look great, but they are bland, they are rough, and that's going to lead some people to be, at minimum disappointed when they put their army box together. But there is a silver lining. Games Workshop has suggested a promise, maybe not fully promised, but suggested a promise that we'll be able to mix and match parts between the Foot Knights and our other knights, bringing them back to, or bringing them up to, sorry, a more modern standard. It won't be 100% fixing the issue, but I think if those heads fit on even even relatively, you know, matching in terms of scale, if the shields fit, I think it's going to do a lot to really bring these guys to the next level and kind of make a nice hybrid unit. So that's an interesting thing. What's also interesting is that they keep showing these guys as knights in the lance formation. Now, the lance formation, for anyone who knows Bretonnian, is just how knights deploy. In 6th edition on, that meant 3 wide and up to 5 deep. So, I think you could have 5 knights all the way to 15. Um, Prior to that, they were in this shape, this like 1, 2, 3 model rank system. And I think you could go to 4 and then 5. Like you could still have sort of the same number of models roughly as the 6th edition book, but they had this different shape to them. They weren't just a brick. They were an actual, a lance formation. Like it was cool. It wasn't just a title, a name for a rule. You know, this was a deployment choice, and I think it might be coming back. I don't know why they would choose to do that. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not for it or against it. I do think it will lead to some wonky interactions for flanking these guys, but I don't care. I'm all for it. Anything that builds up visual interest, as in like it makes the game more interesting to look at, like weird formations, I love it. Do it. Um, and I think whether these guys get built as Knights of the Realm or take their helmets off and they're Knights Errant, I think it's going to just be still a really spectacular looking unit in the hands of a good painter. Then we get the peasants. Now these guys here, these are again 6th edition. They are small. They're going to be very small next to those foot knights. They're going to be very small next to some of their bigger, newer horses. But they're also malnourished. I mean, in the lore, Bretonnia does not treat the peasants very well. I don't know what they'll do in terms of retcons for that, because the Bretonnians, again, are Arthurian, chivalric heroes. Still not good guys. Like everything in Warhammer, the good guys are not good guys. And the peasants, I think, can really represent that by being malnourished. Maybe they're hunched. One of the things with men at arms is that they're the least hunched. They have the best spines, the best teeth of the peasants. And they don't say that just because. They say that because they mean it. These guys are picked because they're the healthiest. Um, the archers, they're just every peasant is trained to use bows. So, that's just everybody's there. That's why they look even more rough. I mean, you got like 2 or 3 guys in that unit that are missing eyes, whether it's one or both. Um, they are scarred. They are rough looking. But it's cool to have these guys back. They are going to give us in the form of men at arms an alternative, a cheaper one for the foot knights. Now, it seems like it's possible we're still also going to get the battle pilgrims back. I don't know yet. It's not been officially confirmed, but it's hinted at, which I'll get to after. I do think if battle pilgrims exist, it does create a bit of a problem, because we'll have battle pilgrims as worse troops, but more reliable in many ways, based on the old rules. And then these guys, basically those two are just fighting each other for which one's more useful. And then these guys are like a more proficient soldier, but still not good if we again stick to the old rules. And then we're going to have foot knights who are, in my head, they're going to be good soldiers. They're going to be good options. They're going to be ones we can rely on. It's going to create a weird balance where it's going to be hard to pick what's your best melee choices, because you might have some choices that don't really. It might just come down to points. Do you have the points to spare for the better unit? Is what it might come down to. So that's something to keep in mind. The archers, what's cool about archers for Bretonnia is, unlike most units in the game, they come with something special, which are these spikes in the front. These spikes, they're called palisades, I think. Stakes, defensive stakes. Defensive stakes. These basically allowed you to have a level of defense against charge with these guys that most units don't have access to, but was very important because they're not good soldiers. I can't stress that enough. These are like the worst humans in the game. So when things would charge them, they would lose their charge bonuses, whether it was extra strength or whatever. It would have to specifically have a way around that. These guys had a way to basically make better units worse and give themselves a chance to maybe hold it a little bit longer. Also, 32 models per box for the archers. No information yet about the men-at-arms, but I feel like it might be the same thing. They were the same price before. They also both had 16 models in a box, as I recall. Maybe it was 20 for the men-at-arms, but if they're putting the archers at 32, I think they might do the same thing for the men-at-arms, but we will see. Just a few months away, and we'll get the final confirmation. And then we also get this new plastic, which I assume it's plastic, because of the way they've presented it on that day. This damsel, this handmaiden, this is a spellcaster for the Bretonnians. All the Bretonnian spellcasters, or most of them anyways, lore-wise, are female. They're taken as young girls. They're taken away from their families. They're essentially considered kind of like dead. And they go off with the other handmaidens and hang out with the Fey Enchantress, who is the essentially spokeswoman for the Lady of the Lake. And then they come back as adults, and they are just beautiful women who cast magic spells. They're not part of the army, but they join armies to provide information and support. This model, I love it. This looks like a medieval woman, as much as needs to. I'm sure somebody who's a better, more knowledgeable history buff than I will point out a bunch of flaws in what she's wearing, that it's, no woman would actually dress like this for whatever reason. That's fine. Doesn't matter how accurate it is. This is still fantasy. She looks like a medieval woman, as you would expect in a movie or a TV show. And there's nothing about her that screams warrior. I think this is going to be a really nice contrasting model in an army that is dirty peasants and, heavily armored knights. Just a woman in a dress. She also has your classic, at this point, Games Workshop spellcaster pose of, I'm hovering above the ground in some way. In this case, she's standing on flowers. And she's leaning forward, holding a staff, like a spear forward. They've used this sculpt, this design, so many times for Magic users and even Psychers in 40k that I think it must be sort of a rule that this is one of the go-to sculpts, and that's why we have it, but it's fine. She looks great, lots of details, but also lots of open space for us to play around with, freehand designs, whether it's, essentially cross-stitching, or whatever you call it, a thing that I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. A design, adding a design to her 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 cloak or her headpiece, her dress itself, whatever. I think this is a super cool model. I love it. Another one that I'm excited to get, even though I have lots of damsels. I have like 2 or 3, more than enough for what I use in my games when I do take up Bretonnia. And I don't care. I'll have another one, I guess. Now, we also, I'm just going to go over these. These were not new at the show. We've already seen these over the course of the last few months. These are all resin models. They're going to come from Forge World. And, there's mixed bag of emotions when it comes to Forge World. I don't like it. Um, but I'm more experienced with older Forge World models, which just are not the best in terms of quality and even sculpt. But modern Forge World models, they're really good. I've seen some of the newer stuff for Horus Heresy in person, and it's great. Um, like it's just as nice in terms of quality, possibly more quality, better quality than GW Plastics in some cases. But overall, what's important is that it's a better quality product at this point. They just have way too many old kits still in circulation that just unfortunately sour the experience for a lot of modelers. But these here, they're just pretty basic units, heroes. So I don't see there being too many issues outside of straight up damaged and warped minis. Now, we have some stuff here that I think is important of note. I do think the Foot Knight is going to be on his own. I think that the uh, Fey Enchantress, this is a new Fey Enchantress, or an old Fey Enchantress. I forget her name. I think both of those will be sold on their own. I do think the foot and horse ones will be sold together. We used to get blisters and even plastic kits that were combined, and they they would come as foot and mounted options. I think that's what's going to happen here. Um, I think that they might want to force us to buy both because honestly, I don't think I'd ever buy two. I would buy either the foot or the mounted. Probably the mounted. I think there is just a level of marketing here and like financing that's just like, you know what, if we sculpt two but we put them together, we can charge essentially double for something that really isn't going to actually cost us double to do. So I think that is just how it's going to be packaged. I think we're going to get two standard bearers in a package. That could be wrong, but that's what I think is going to happen. That might be a bit too cynical, but it's Games Workshop. It's hard not to be cynical with them at times. Anyways, these are all really nice models too. I love them. Yeah, the horse is big, but it's supposed to be. It's a war horse, a Bretonnian war horse. And Bretonnian war horses are not just any war horses. They're war horses bred with elven steeds. In the older rules, they were the only mounts that I recall that could have barding and not lose a point of movement. So horses had 8 movement, but Bretonnian horses stayed at 8 movement. Everybody else's barded war horses went down to 7. So that's something of note. It took basically the best of both worlds. They're strong and fast. And yeah, that damsel, she's gorgeous. I think I went over this before in another video. These are all really good models. I don't think I'll need all of them. I say that, and then at the same time, I still think I might end up at some point having all of them just because they are really, really good. Um, there will probably be more Forge World stuff coming. Actually, there is one more thing. There's the trebuchet. This is the old pewter trebuchet from, again, 6th edition, like most of this stuff, but it's been retooled as uh, Forge World resin. So not ideal considering I really like the metal, but I think most people don't. And it's just understandable that this has gone to resin. If we weren't going to get a plastic kit, I think it was basically either Forge World resin or nothing. And for people who need a trebuchet, I think it's better we have a Forge World option than nothing because it's a very important part of the roster of Bretonnians. You might not always take a trebuchet, but it's actually very nice to have that option to be able to throw something at distance and soften your target up before you arrive with your knights. The knights are good, but in almost every fight you're going to be outnumbered, and you really only get your best charge or your best hits the turn you charge. So being able to soften them up first is really important, and the trebuchet does a great job of that. Now, also, I mentioned the Battle Pilgrims before. That's because in the article that they released at the same time as the reveal at Warhammer Day, they mentioned that There's a selection of returning metal heroes and specialist units, which will be GW Direct exclusive options. Well, they're metal. They say metal, and they're talking about heroes and specialist units. They could have done the trebuchet as a metal unit, but I do think they just wanted to make sure this stayed around as um, an option for us, because I think that also means some of these might not stay in stock, whether it's because there's plastic kits coming or forge rolled ones coming. I don't know, but Grail Knights, Questing Knights, and the Battle Pilgrims. I think all of those units are going to come back for at least a limited time, if not permanently, but probably limited up until they get closer to releasing a modern plastic or resin kit. And then they're also going to have characters. This will be more damsels and more lords and stuff, is my guess. The special characters make no sense because they didn't exist in this time period. So, yeah, we know now that we're going to have a Pegasus Lord, um, some foot heroes, another mounted hero, a couple of them. We're going to have regular knights like we used to have, Knights Errant, Knights of the Realm. We're going to have Pegasus Knights. We're going to have foot knights. We're going to have a couple of units of peasants. We're going to have trebuchets. And we're going to have a special couple of other units, which I think I list pretty much what we're going to get. Maybe mounted yeomen. Those are just peasants with ponies. Or like workhorses or something. So there's going to be a very solid roster of units. The Bretonnians never had a big roster. Top of my head, they had 2 lords and 3 heroes, and possibly only 2 heroes. I think it was 3, but it might have been 2. Probably actually it was 2 because I think the paladin um, and the BSB were just the same guy. So I think it was like 4 characters total. They had 4 units of core, which were like the 2 units of knights that we already saw in the peasants. And then for special, it was like peasants on horses, Pegasus Knights, Questing Knights, Battle Pilgrims, and then rare was Questing Knights and Trebuchets. Like, pretty much I think everything's going to be available. I do think it's a good sign that the Bretonnian list is essentially going to be what we had before, plus a little bit more. And everything's going to be back either as a plastic or a resonance in some way at some point. So I think that's a really good sign. Um, Also is a good sign to, when points towards the other armies that they're probably also going to be in the same position where most everything's going to make a return. Some stuff might disappear for lore reasons, but I think overall we're going to be okay. Now, getting past the new information, I want to get into the core factions. This is just a refresher, and everything else past here. It might not all be core factions, but it's a refresher of everything I've talked about and everything GW has told us up until now. So, our core factions. For the good guys, and I know some people are going to argue, well, these guys aren't good guys, those guys aren't bad guys, and whatever. But Empire of Man, Dwarven Mountain Holds, Kingdom of Bretonnia, Wood Elf Realms, High Elf Realms. We got 5 options. There's nothing new here. We'll get to that in a moment, but there are some new options coming. They're just not here yet. And then we have Orcs and Goblin Tribes, Warriors of Chaos, Beastmen Brayherds, and Tomb Kings of Khemri. These are the quote unquote bad guys. That's 9 factions that are going to be in the main book or books, depending how they split it. There's a good chance they just sell us 2 books because they love to sell us books. I've sort of resigned myself that in certain cases I do have to buy books. I don't like buying their books anymore, but in this case here, if they sell me 2 army list books, then I guess I'm buying 2 army list books because I've got Empire, I've got Warriors of Chaos are about to get started. I'll be talking about that later. I've got dwarves, and I'm probably gonna end up with Tomb Kings because they're the other army. So I guess we'll see how that goes. But yeah, not all of my armies are here. In fact, really technically, of all the armies I really play the most and have worked on the most in terms of painting, um, just my empires here. Even my Bretonnians, like Like they're just a army I break out once in a while. They're not painted. It's just every once in a while I toss down kind of an ugly bear army, but it's fun to play. None of these other armies I really have anything for, but I'm still excited. I think it's a good solid mix of factions. I only wish that we had not received the Wood Elves, or maybe not the High Elves, and we got something else in their place, just because we already have two elves at that point, and that maybe we got one more core faction, but I'm not sure who would fit there for the other side, just to balance it out. Vampire is probably the most likely because of where the game is set, but at the same time, you know, I can understand that the vampire wars had just happened, so they're all hiding right now. I think ogres would have been a good option, just because the ogres are, they're armies that kind of are everywhere, and yeah, I think that would have been a good one to have in there. But you know what, nine's still great. I also think it's kind of interesting that high elves, wood elves, dwarves, Bretonnia, orcs and goblins, and tomb kings, all of those armies got gutted. The Empire of Man, most of it's still available, I think, or at least it has been up until recently. There's a few things missing, but not too much. Warriors of Chaos, again, pretty much has stayed intact. Pretty much everything has stayed available. Some of it's been split off, but not too much. And Beastmen, again, have mostly stayed intact. Of these nine armies, only three of them are something you can just go out and buy stuff for right now. Whether it's the same models we had in 8th edition or something that has sort of pretty much exactly replaced it. And I do wonder if they chose these more than some of the others because some of these like Empire and Warriors are quite iconic. But the other ones, not only are they iconic, they're armies that really need to get their models back anyways. Uh, Vampire counts are pretty much all still available, whether it's old or current models. Skaven are all still there. Lizardmen are all pretty much still there. I know they just got refreshed, so I guess that depends how they get used in this game. Ogres, again, pretty much all still there. Dark Elves, pretty solid amount still there. Some of it's missing, but again, not too much. Um, I do wonder if they chose these armies because it allowed them to bring some armies back that we're going to need some real attention. The other armies that I mentioned that are not in the core factions, they're actually going to get a PDF list so that you can play them. These are legacy factions, I've heard people refer to them as. And it'll be like some of the Horus Heresy PDF lists we've received, like Solar Guard or whatever they're called, Solar Auxilia, the Demons. They don't have their book essentially right away, so you get a PDF. I think that's what's going to happen. They've said that as much anyways. And also the game is set about 200 to 300 years before the end times. So it's after the Vampire Wars and some of the other bigger events in the lore. It's well before end times, and it's coming up on when the first big chaos invasion with Asavar Cool or something like that, the last ever chosen. He attacked Prague, and it's gonna be something that's coming up in the lore. I think it's gonna be a campaign at one point. Um, we also know that this is rank and flank. It's back to square bases. It's back to units that are ranked up. As you can see in these pictures, a lot of these units are quite widely ranked. 6 and 8 models wide. Not quite as wide as Hordes, but wider than the old, 4 and 5 wide units we had for most of the editions. So I think it's a nice balance. Like for example, those halberdiers for the Empire at the top center. There's what's that? 6, 8. There's still only about 30 models in that unit. And regularly, I think people would run them at about anywhere between 20 and 30, with around 25 being the average before 8th edition. Um, it was in 8th edition when like 40 and 50 man units sort of became the norm. When I look at this, some of these units are maybe slightly big compared to what we used to have, but most of these I still think are pretty manageable. You know, they look big because they're spread wide, but they don't have as many models as you might expect. Um, there's some other changes. It's possible characters will be outside of units, um, like I believe happens in Age of Sigmar. I think that's still how that works in Age of Sigmar. Although I still also would hold the argument that GW always, or almost always, would have models like characters outside of units just to highlight them. So it's possible that that captain near the halberdiers, he maybe is actually supposed to be in the unit, but they've pulled him out just for the sake of the picture. Because I don't see any other characters outside of units. It's just him. And it might be that he's the only character on the field, but I do think it's probably likely that he's going to be inside the unit in a regular game. We can also look at this and go and make some assumptions that Empire is still going to have their detachment rule. Those halberdiers have some handgunners next to them. It's a small, strangely sized unit, and it's probably a unit that's with them as a detachment, and the halberdiers are the parent. What that refers to, or what I'm referring to there, is the old Empire detachment rule where smaller units would attach to bigger units and provide support in combat, whether by shooting or charging enemies that were attacking the parent. So that's a good sign to me. Um, you can see a flank charge on the far right against some knights. You can see, you know, war machines up on a hill. I think overall the game is going to play very much the same, but with some tweaks. Magic's going to be different. Maybe characters will be slightly different. Ranks will work a little bit different. But overall, I think the game is going to play very similar to what we're used to. And that makes me happy. Um, we're also going to get a bunch of discontinued plastics back. The last image had the War Altar of Sigmar. We've got orcs, which just basically are all gone. High elves, again, basically all gone, especially those flying chariots. I mean, they were only in production like 2 years, maybe three, before the whole system was discontinued with a bunch of plastics like those guys who just didn't come over to Age of Sigmar for some reason. Um, the orcs survived like the first year or two, but like by like 2018, the orcs were essentially gone, as I recall. They were down to like night goblins who became their own army. Trolls became their own army, and black orcs became their own army. Um, Basic orcs were gone. I think a lot of the wolf riders were gone. Like a lot of this stuff you're seeing for orcs, just it's gone. It doesn't exist. This is going to let us get our stuff back. I see snotlings in this image. I see all kinds of characters. I mean, I just see loads of stuff. Sorry, I'm fighting off a cold. It's very damp where I am. The beautiful time of year where it's like not quite winter, but it's not warm either, and it's wet every single day. Um, and the High Elf, same thing. Just a bunch of units that have been discontinued. I think literally everything in this picture is discontinued. I don't think there's a single thing shown for High Elves you can still buy. Also, old terrain. Um, the hill, for a minute, I thought it was the plastic hill, but it's not. It's a custom hill. But those buildings, that's the manor house, that's the watchtower, the chapel, that's the gates from the manor house. I mean, that is an old set. And I'm really, really hoping that we get some of these old sets back. They just recently did a made-to-order terrain set for 40K. I hope that that is a sign of things to come. I am unfortunately willing to spend unreasonable amounts of money on terrain. I really hope GW doesn't hear that, but at the same time, sort of do, because man, I want some more terrain. Um, there are some things I missed. I have most of the 40, or sorry, I have most of the fantasy terrain. that came out in plastics, but there's some of it I just want two or three more sets worth to really complete my collection and build it out, and also to give me conversion bits because there's some ideas I have for custom pieces that I just can't do financially, in a reasonable way. But I mean, if I could get the manor house for roughly what I used to pay for it, two or three of those would be pretty sick. Um, oh, I must have had a this word fade. These words fade in for some reason. Oh well. And proper old world aesthetics. What I mean by that is that the game looks like it's fantasy. That terrain I was talking about, the battlefields, the way they're set up, the way the armies are set up, everything feels like Warhammer Fantasy. Age of Sigmar almost immediately changed the aesthetics. Nothing looks like Warhammer Fantasy to me when you play Age of Sigmar. They have tried very hard to move away from Warhammer Fantasy. Not only do the units not rank up, um, they they have all kinds of like they're weirdly big centerpiece units all over the place. This is back to blocks of troops. The terrain is natural, or it's like ruins that you can tell are more meant to be almost like blocking pieces, like to move the flow of the battle. Um, Whether that's like a big chunk of masonry in the way or a building that's designed to make you go around it, so you're not just walking straight at each other, but overall you have an open field. You have little fences, you have trees. I don't see shipwrecks, I don't see magic portals, I don't see anything like that. I just see natural terrain. I see terrain that provides some sort of advantage or disadvantage on the battlefield. Um, those plastics that we've seen for the Bretonnians, aesthetically speaking, I feel like I'm about to buy Warhammer Fantasy as I remember it with, some updated units and stuff. I'm very excited. We're also going to get new factions. Now, they're not coming anytime soon. I mean, that could be meaning they're a year away, or they could be 5 years away. I mean, the game itself was announced in 2019, and we're about to go into 2024. So, you know, it's not like they lied when it said it's going to be a while, and they might be saying the same thing about our new factions. Specifically, Kislev and Grand Cathay. These were announced in conjunction with Warhammer Total War 3, which included them as playable factions in the main game. And GW actually worked with Creative Assembly to make sure that those armies not only look the way GW planned for them to look in this game, so that they would match up, but that they played the same way. Basically, what they did, there was an article months and months ago, maybe like at this point years ago, where they said, we wrote an 8th edition book for Cathay and Kislev, and we gave those to Creative Assembly to help them make the armies that we saw in the game, because every army was based on 8th edition, although that does lend itself to an interesting thought. Bretonnia, Skaven, and Beastmen did not get 8th edition codex or army books. I think it's possible they also made 8th edition books for those and put them away at some point. The rumor always was Bretonnia had a book ready to go, and then they just canceled it. And they said, nope, we're not even going to bother releasing it, just, shred it. Although I think they probably just put it in storage. My guess is that those 3 books were at some level finished and ready to go, or in the final stages of being finished in, whatever level of playtesting they did. And that's what was given to Creative Assembly. Kislev and Grand Cathay both had to have full books written. I assume that means just the army list, of course. But, yeah, we have 2 new factions coming. Kislev did used to be in the game. We're looking at the map of Kislev right now, or a map of Kislev. And yeah, these guys here, they had models back in like 5th edition, 6th edition, in that range, maybe even 4th. Um, they are just basically like northern Russian empire, but they're going to get new stuff. And Grand Cathay, again, we have a map. Everything's going to be 28 millimeter. I've already talked about that. You know, but the new stuff definitely looks like it's closer to Age of Sigmar scale. Cathay is like essentially Warhammer's version of like Ming Dynasty China or something like that. Like it's China like several hundred or 1,000 years ago, and they're led by dragons. Like they're like the king and the sorry not the king but the emperor and like his children. They're like humans, but they're dragons, so they kind of like they can change form. Um, I do expect there to be some sort of mechanic similar to Marathi in Age of Sigmar, where she comes as a little elf woman who then turns into a giant snake woman. Um, she goes all Fulgrim and turns into a monster. I think that's going to happen in this army too. Obviously, I don't know that for sure, but I feel like that makes the most sense. Um, the bases, they're all going to be square. That's also important to cover. I've already obviously said that. We've seen the pictures. But what's also important to note if you don't know this, those sizes are changing. Basic infantry used to have a 20 millimeter base that was square. Now it's going to be 25 millimeter. Those Pegasus Knights have a new base. They used to be 40 millimeter square. Everything's changing. At least I assume everything, or at least a lot of stuff. Doesn't matter. A lot of stuff is changing. We're going to have to rebase or use movement trays that let you scale up to the proper size. Something's going to have to be done. We'll see more about that as we get information. Hopefully, that information is one of the first things we get dropped to us in January, because this game is coming in early 2024. We are probably 4 months away, 5 months away at most from getting Warhammer the Old World. And I think that for anybody who has been frustrated, who has been, just feeling like GW has been stringing us along, I think you can let that go if you're still interested. If you're not, that's fine. But if you are still interested, I think it's, you can start getting excited now, and actually be excited and not have to keep letting yourself down easily every time they release information that turns out to be a picture, or one model, or some very basic bit of information that doesn't go into details. I think that we're going to see a bunch of information for other stuff right now for the next month and a half. But at the end of December, or more likely around the middle of middle of January, we're going to get a lot of information. This is one of the first releases of 2024, is what they've said. This is probably due to the warehouse issue they had that made Legion Imperialis, Imperialis Legion, whatever it's called, the new Epic, was supposed to come out in like August, and it got pushed back till like I think next week or the week after it's going to be on pre-order. Is my understanding. It's not even on pre-order yet. That game got pushed back like 3 months. I do think Warhammer the Old World was meant to come out in October, and we are 3 months plus behind. And February makes the most sense for an early year, one of the first releases. Get this out of the way and then get back to probably 40K, and then start ramping up for Age of Sigmar 3. Um, and yeah, I think this is February. Also, because apparently GW put out a tweet that said February, and then deleted it right away. I never saw it, but I've seen screenshots of it, and I trust that as much as I know I can. But people seem to corroborate and confirm that it was made. So there apparently was a tweet that said February, and then it got deleted. So take that as you will. Also, there's rumors. The rumors are from Hastings. If you've been at Warhammer for a long time, you know Hastings as a rumor giant who's been giving us stuff for 20 plus years. He's apparently said that you know we're gonna get one starter box. It's not two. There's been ongoing debate about whether or not the rumors about two separate starter boxes are real. It doesn't make sense to me. Um, it's going to be 185 pounds, which is like a lot if it's only going to be Bretonnia, and then 185 pounds if it's only going to be Tomb Kings. Unless the goal is to make a bunch of new plastics, to hype up people and string us along for like 4 years, and then release a game that nobody can afford because they just decided to completely jump the shark in terms of pricing. Um, Unless that's the goal, then I just don't believe it. It just makes no sense. And he, again, is very good at his pricing and his rumors. He usually knows what he's talking about. He's very clearly, maybe not somebody who works for Games Workshop, but obviously knows somebody. Um, at this point, I almost feel like he must know somebody who actually is like important because they still haven't nailed down who he is or who he's attached to after this long. Like, for him to have access to information like this, there's only going to be a handful of people left that it really could be. Um, I've always kind of wondered if Hastings was just an employee that maybe was part of the marketing team in a sense, or at some point has become part of the marketing team because I feel like his stuff is genuine and he's probably just telling us what's going to happen because he knows and maybe is supposed to tell us. Um, yeah, anyways, so the rest of the rumors is Cetra in plastic, that in the summer we're going to get Orcs and Empire in a campaign book and a a conflict box, Empire and versus Orcs. I talked about this like years ago that I said I hope that we get constant rotating combo boxes like we do in 40k and Age of Sigmar, and that's how they advance the plot. Is just like, oh, and now the plot is about the Empire and Orcs, and now the plot is about dwarves and high elves, maybe even like whatever. I just think that'd be a cool way to do it. It'd be a cool way to start kind of getting some of these armies done in a more natural, fluid, you know, way. And I don't know. It's pretty exciting to hear all those rumors. So February, 185 pounds, Tomb Kings and Bretonnia with the army book. A whole bunch of stuff comes summer with Orcs and Empire. Apparently, they're both getting a bunch of plastic kits. It really does sound like we're going to get like a really new fantasy experience, and even if you don't like the game, you're going to get new models. So again, just keep positive. I think on this one. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to talk about here. I've been going on for a long time. I think I'm going to stop either way because I don't think there's anything else to say. I'm really excited. Everything looks really good. This final picture here, I didn't mention it, but this is the Border Princes, which are like where everybody's rejects go. That's why you've got like Empire shields and Bretonnian shields and Kislev shields, and there's dwarves here and there's elves and everybody lives here. Basically, they're just people who go and form their own country, and it's really usually just like a city or a fort. And because they're either trying to open up a new trade route or because they're just like exiled or refuse to stay home where they can't, you know, be the boss they think they should be. This is also pretty close to a lot of the dwarf stuff. I don't know exactly where it is offhand, but I do know. Oh yeah, there's Barak Var. That's a dwarf hold. Um, Karaza Karak. There it is up here. I think that's Karaza Karak. It's a whole bunch of like nobody stuff. There's a bunch of orcs down here and Skaven. There's a lot of lore that happens in this area too. It's a really cool area. I'm excited to see this get some more love. Anyways, that's where I'm going to stop it. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any thoughts or comments, leave them down below. And as always, have yourselves a great day.